Jibajitunda. Olonde, the one that fits ya. Katikende Jibajitunda. Olonde, the one that fits.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Nile Book Club, and today we are reading, or we've read and we'll be discussing The Perfect Nine by Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. And for those that don't know, the Nile Book Club is a new book club centered on African-centered writing, and we try to find stories and go to countries that are lesser amplified.
Yeah, good. I think Katasi said it perfectly. We are also branching out, and we've started being kind of receiving, or rather we've started receiving requests. So we had our first batch of requests from publishers to read 2 books. One which is out right now. It's on our blog, so check out the Nile Book Club blog. You can just find that on our Twitter, or if you follow us on IG at the Nile Book Club. And yeah, we reviewed the first, The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. And we're also currently reading Living While Black, right?
That's right.
So yeah, so look out for that. All right, so The Perfect Nine. Okay, so how do I describe it? I feel like it's been described as an Odyssean kind of like epic written by Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, who's like Kenya's premier poet, writer, playwright, who decided a few years ago that he was just going to write in Gikuyu. And very interestingly, he translates his own work. And recently, The Perfect Nine was not only nominated for International Booker Prize, but also he got a nomination for the translation as well. So those are the perks of decolonizing your mind. So it's incredible. Now the book is about Gikuyu folklore, following 9 women, technically 10, as they go on this journey to kind of giving birth to, I guess, the Gikuyu clans, the Gikuyu kind of nation, and the kind of trials and tribulations they faced, being pursued by the Gikuyu men and trying to make it back to creating this Gikuyu nation. So let's start with you. Actually, we've got a guest, we've got a member. He was, if you may remember him, when we did Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, as well as The First Woman, which was a very landmark book club, because it was a book about women, but we men discussed it. So you may remember James Chibidige, who also read this book and will give us a nice kind of discussion about. So James, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay.
Good to have you. We had a little preamble, so we're not going to pretend like this is the first time.
James, how you doing?
Yeah, but hey, long time no see. So first of all, yeah, how you been, and what did you think of The Perfect Nine by Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o?
I've been doing okay. In regards to The Perfect Nine, I actually listened to it. I got the Audible book.
Same.
I listened to it over about a week. I thought the story was quite straightforward. I think the most value that I got from the book was just learning a bit more about Kikuyu folklore, Kikuyu culture, Kikuyu names, just like the origin story of the Kikuyu. But other than that, I wouldn't say that I enjoyed it much. Like I said, it was very straightforward.
And why didn't you enjoy it? What was wrong with it?
I guess I found it a bit boring. You know, I could kind of see where it was going. I could see the different plot points, but other than that, there wasn't much else for me that kind of sparks my interest, if you see what I'm saying, you know. I think I like the idea of an African epic, and in relation to the epic tradition, you know, if you go back to kind of different ancient cultures, the ancient Greek epics, there's lots of other ones, like even in the Middle East and so forth. But yeah, I just kind of felt that it was just very straightforward. I didn't think it had a lot of subtlety either. I think that all of the kind of the different imagery and the different ideas was just kind of presented in a very matter-of-fact way. Yeah.
Wow. Well, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I think I was really, to be honest with you, I listened to it as well on Audible, and I was really looking forward to it because I remember reading a play of his called The Hermit, and I read it about 5 years ago, and I remember really enjoying it because it was one of the first times I'd read a play written by an African playwright, and especially as well he'd studied in Makerere University, so I think he wrote that play whilst he was at uni there. So it was performed by some Ugandans, and I was really I've always been kind of looking forward to reading more Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, or at least he was known as James Ngũgĩ back then. But yeah, and also reading bits of Decolonizing Your Mind. I was looking forward to this, and it just, on paper, it just sounded like the ideal kind of book. But like yourself, maybe because I listened to it, so it'll be interesting to hear what Katasi thinks, because I'm assuming you read it as opposed to listening to it. I maybe listening to it was kind of a cop out for me. Like I felt like I could zone out, and maybe it's not the best thing to listen to. Maybe it's something that's
okay. I think it depends. I think the Audible presentation was excellent. So if I've ever had a complaint about a recording for a book, it's in the presentation. So some of these books out there are very wooden. They've got like a narrator who sounds like a robot. But I thought that they put a lot of effort into the narration, and that was actually good.
Yeah, and I think they got an actual Kenyan narrator, but it wasn't. That's not what I mean, that it wasn't a good presentation. But I just mean that it kind of gave me an easy way out. I felt like I would love to. I'm gonna get the hard copy and just really read it on paper and really let my imagination run wild, as opposed to kind of be told where to go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean. But what I'm saying in reference to that, the idea, just because you've listened to it, it's a cop out. I disagree with that.
I'm not saying anyone that listens to it is a cop out. It felt, for me, I became a lazy listener because I was just listening to it. I became a lazy reader because I know when I'm listening to certain stories, like I felt like, and especially the complexity, I'm not going to lie to you, the complexity of the story and the culture as well, like it was unfamiliar. I think I would have benefited from sitting down and reading it out as opposed to listening. Because when I listen to, say, for example, The Other Black Girl or other stuff I've listened to, I'm familiar with the language and the names and the culture. So I can sometimes be a passive listener, but this one, you need to be active. And I think that's where my problem was. I just wasn't active enough of a reader / listener. And so therefore my kind of critiques of it, maybe sometimes not drawing me in, is a bit unfair because I didn't really do it justice. So Katasi, what did you think? Because you read it. So what was your thoughts?
So yes, I did read it. This is the book. And I think it's important to let listeners know and viewers know like how long the Audible was versus how many pages. And this was like medium-sized print, and it was 227 pages, and I thought it was quite digestible. And in the beginning, I was quite shocked at like what it was. I mean, I didn't do enough research. Just the name itself, the brand of Ngũgĩ, was just enough to be like, okay, I'll give it a go because I wanted to read him before. But then when it began and it was like this folklore, I wasn't expecting that. It was folktale. So I was like, oh, this is different. So it took me a while to get my head around it. And then I think I really did get into it. And I thought about James in some parts, because I know you kind of like fantasy and stuff, right? And there was a lot of that in there. And I definitely felt like the climax was when they were meeting all the ogres.
The ogres. Yeah.
I kept on calling them ogas in my head, by the way.
Ogas. Like ogas in Nigerian oga.
Yeah.
What is the Nigerian oga? What does that mean in Nigeria?
Sorry?
What does it mean in Nigeria?
I think oga is like big chief. Like you are oga.
Yeah. OGA, yeah.
How is it spelled? It's spelled OGRE, right? But you're going oga.
I don't even know, but I was like, no, that's not what we're reading here. Yeah. Anyway, I really then sort of like got into it. And just the central themes of women for me were just like, that was fantastic. Like coming, like, I think he's written a very feminist text, and this seems to be a running theme in our book club, that we have strong female characters, and I just really enjoyed the different dimensions of femininity that were presented and how strong the sisters were. And there was, I mean, it was simple to read. I understand what you're saying, James, and it was quite straightforward, but I think it had to be because there were so many themes being explored, from like disability, you know, to feminism, to sort of almost like a very gentle manifesto on how to live life, you know, especially towards the end. And like there were moments I read it out loud to my son so he could keep quiet, as like so I could read it, but I enjoyed it. Like I found the end to be really powerful, like continuing the legacy of your parents and how to live. So I actually really enjoyed it, and particularly I think around Kikuyu culture, there was an opportunity to learn more about that. So obviously we're East African, so we hear these names, and I've worked with Iwanjiku, you know, so understanding where her name is from and placing it there was just really exciting for me.
Yeah, I had a very nice experience because I spent a month in Kenya.
Say that again, James. Kalunji, are you there? It's not my network, is it?
I'm here. I think it's his network, but I'll ask you a question. Like, so you read it. So whereas we listened to it and we, for some reason, didn't have the same impact on us that it did on you. And on top of that, we're two dudes. So, and you make a good point. Like, and I realized as well, like, it was talking about 10 women.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, brother, but we can't see you. But just quickly, hold on. We're just making a point here. So we're two dudes, and a story talking about 10 women, and we kind of maybe, at least, okay, maybe myself, I didn't connect to it as much as I hoped I would, and maybe I can't use the older boy excuse, but I just felt like it was a long, even though I liked what it had to say about the world and the way to kind of live your life and respecting your mother and your father and your family, it did feel like a long proverb potentially. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the whole point was to kind of put Chikuyu culture on a world stage like that, akin to maybe Greek level kind of myth and mythical status, because you hear a lot of stories of the Greeks and how people say Socrates once said. So maybe in the future we will say, well, what Thiong'o once said, you know. So maybe that was the whole point of it, for it to be a long proverb, to put Chikuyu culture on the world stage like that. Did you feel that long proverb vibe, Katasi? And then off to James.
So I felt like it was a long proverb, and I think these are really important things to put on the world stage. And it kind of, I'll be honest, I haven't read Chintu, but obviously you've just done the audible for Chintu, and I wondered if you could, you know, let's just pause and clap for him. James,
yeah, James is not pleased.
But in the sense that these are the founding stories in the way that we know Adam and Eve, right? It doesn't matter that it's in Ngũgĩ that's behind it, but we know Adam and Eve, we know Chintu and Nambi, right? So I wondered if I know you both read it, if you sort of found parallels there, but it didn't get too long. And I actually think maybe listening to this around a campfire would be amazing, because this is an old tale, and in Uganda it's called Olufumo, right? That's how knowledge was passed on. And I just think it's a shame that you didn't really get that experience from the audio.
I mean, to be honest with you, at the first, it started off really strong. And maybe I think it's one of those things where actually it is a short read, so you get the most out of it if you sit down with it for that amount of time. It's not one of those kind of like, let me get the first 5 chapters, come back, have a break, because you're going to forget what's happened before. I found that when I first started listening to it, I was so engaged. Like I was really taken there. When the dudes first met the Perfect Nine, and you know, they were all getting to know each other and the challenges that they were setting each other, it was definitely vivid. But I think I left too long of a gap between the stories. And like you said, it's a campfire thing. And if you're around the campfire, you're not going to go, hey guys, I'm going to go toilet, I'll be right back. You stay there for that duration of the story and until you get to the end. So I think maybe that's the mistake I made. And that's why and another reason why I probably made it simplistic and short is because this original audience, he wants the everyday Chikuyu man / woman or boy or girl to be able to access this. You said it's accessible. So for him to make it simple to understand isn't necessarily to insult his Chikuyu audience or original audience, but it's more to say, hey, you can all enjoy this. It's only 200+ pages. Come through and don't be intimidated by this. James, did you feel like it was a kind of a long proverb, and did that kind of make you disengage from the story?
Well, I thought it was essentially Ngũgĩ's attempt of putting the creation myths of Kikuyu people down on paper. So I expected it to be what it was in that sense, you know. And I feel like, yeah, every ethnicity has a creation myth, you know, and I think it's good that it's been turned into like an extended story in that respect. And I was going to get back to what Katasi said. Katasi said that she really liked the fact that it gave her context when she's working with other Kenyans from the perspective of their names. And I had the very similar experience because I spent a month in Kenya in 2007, and there was a lady called Njeri. So, and one Jerry was one of the Perfect Nine in the story. So I felt that I really liked that aspect of it, in the sense that it gives you so much more context, and it's just interesting how you can learn so much about cultures. So now the next time I go to Kenya, or the next time I interact with a Kikuyu, there's a little bit that I know about them. But in reference to me saying that I found the story quite straightforward, I feel like in the sense of a story, I didn't really enjoy it that much. If you think about, if you're reading something and what you get out of reading a particular type of story, I didn't really enjoy the story as a story, even though as an exercise, there was lots of things that I learned and that I enjoyed about it. And there's lots of things that like I said, gave a lot of context to things that I already knew. You know, just things like, because as you know, Kikuyu people are Bantu, you know, so he put in a bit of that Ubuntu philosophy in there. I don't know if you guys remember that. You know, all humans are humans because of other humans. You know, I am a man through other people. You know, that was quite evident. And I guess it's just kind of like the values that Kikuyu people have. You know, it's about marriage, it's about children, it's about creation, life and death. There was a lot to enjoy about it, but as it is story in itself, as something to enjoy as a piece of entertainment, I didn't really enjoy it very much. I thought it was quite straightforward.
So could I say that maybe the reason why maybe his intention wasn't necessarily to kind of parrot or use similar kind of traditional storytelling techniques. Maybe we're familiar or used to a particular type of story as readers of Western literature. Do you think that had anything to do with it? Because it is a Chikuyu story, and maybe that is the form in which their storytelling takes. And perhaps because we're unfamiliar with their storytelling technique, we kind of found it difficult to follow.
I would disagree with that, because I didn't find it difficult to follow. That's the whole point. It was very nail on the head, very straightforward, very
perhaps
obvious.
difficult to enjoy. Maybe difficult because we're used to different types of stories, and this kind of story, it wasn't as engaging or as enjoyable because we're not used to it.
No, I think Ngũgĩ needed to work harder to improve it as on the merit of it being a story. You know, I felt like he had all the ideas that he wanted to put down, and he just put them all down on paper, and we read it from beginning to end. But there was not a lot of subtlety or subtext you know, and just in the way that it was written. It was kind of like boom, 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 boom. I see what's happening, and then it ended.
So maybe the challenge was that he was retelling this folk tale, right? So there's only so many places you can deviate. Kind of has to stay true. I'm just wondering if that might have been a factor in it.
I think I disagree with that as well, because there's other examples where people have taken a story, say a mythology. So, for example, the stories of King Arthur in Britain, right? That is a myth. Those are come from an epic tradition going back into the Middle Ages. Different authors, you can even name them off, have turned that the kind of the essence of that into a story or into a book, with characters, so that it fleshes it out a bit more, and then it goes further. I felt like this didn't really go further. It sounds like the original myth, really. Like, this is the original myth that's handed down from parent to child, and possibly even, like, for example, if there's like events and people are, or oral traditions when they're kind of acting and talking about the origins of the Kikuyu. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah, and but the thing is, though, that's my problem with sometimes with critics of like non-Western literature, or even non-Western, say, plays or films. We enter with kind of expectations of how, say, storytelling or literature should be based off of our exposure to that medium. So therefore, you mentioned subtext and subtlety. And I get that a lot in, like, when I write my plays, people go, oh, not much subtlety, not much subtext. But it could be because I'm coming from a culture where we don't necessarily deal in subtext in the same way as Chekhov might, the same way that Shakespeare might, or Eugene O'Neill, or, all these other like Western kind of people who deal with saying or talking about the unsaid. We say
Okay.
we say what's on our mind potentially. There is no, oh, I came here. There's no ambiguities. What did Katasi mean? What did James mean? I said what I said potentially.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what he's trying to say. And quickly to kind of to the point that it's just the original story. And even though I didn't necessarily wasn't as drawn into the book as maybe I would have wanted to, I still think that there's nothing wrong with him kind of almost retelling that story, because part of the tragedy of African stories and African myths is that they were never written down. So it means that a lot of people kind of missed out on these kind of stories, and he's writing that wrong. And you made that point, put that Kikuyu culture story on paper. So it's here forever and ever, and it's not going anywhere. So I think he kind of did his job by that, and he's serving his audience. So I don't think we should kind of almost punish his storytelling abilities based off of that.
But okay, this is where I disagree again. I feel like a good story is a good story, regardless of the tradition it comes from, and also, even when you have a story from a different tradition and a different culture, it has a unique thing, has things to it that are unique, right? To an extent, when I was reading this, it kind of felt like a shopping list. You've got man and woman go here, this thing happens, then that happens, then this happened, then it ended. And in regards to what you were saying about subtext, I disagree, because subtexts are always prevalent in all cultures. And a good example is, for example, Shakespeare. I was talking to somebody about Shakespeare, and he was saying a lot of people don't understand that there's so much subtext in Shakespeare that people don't actually get because of the different time frame that we're living in. So Shakespeare was thinking of a particular time, so the 16th century, right? So there's like jokes, there's humor, there's kind of cultural references that most people miss because we don't live in the 16th century anymore, and a lot of people, it goes over their heads when they're listening to Shakespeare unless you have kind of more context from of the culture, of the background, which you kind of have that kind of understanding, and I guess I felt like that in the other book that we discussed, by Jennifer Nansabuga, the first woman, because that was there was references in that in terms of our culture and twinning and things related to twins. Other cultures would miss that if they didn't know it. So I feel like all cultures have that subtext, but I feel like this lacks subtext in the sense that it did feel like a shopping list, just kind of like very doom, 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 end. Do you see what I'm saying? I can't hear you,
Natasha, we
Kalunji.
can't hear you.
Sorry, you've spoken a lot about subtext. I'm not going to really add to that, but I think it's just important to take the story for what it is. And I think I echo Kalunji's point around putting African literature on like the global, like the map, rather than just comparing it to Shakespeare. Shakespeare's not writing about English law, is he? Right? So I think there's like just taking things for what they are. And maybe if you, I think I'd feel more comfortable with a conversation if you were drawing parallels from like non-Eurocentric examples, as opposed to making that the standard that you're sort of speaking at right now, James. But
I didn't
no,
mean
wait. So I feel like rather than talking about the shopping list and the lack of characters, I was really drawn to Wangiria. I'm not sure I'm saying it right, Wangiria. So the lady that was crawling, because initially when it was introduced, I felt like, oh well, she's never gonna like become well again, because that's how African tradition is around disability. So I know about, for example, the fact that in Ugandan culture, disabled people in the past were often hidden or even killed, right, as babies. Whereas, I don't know, maybe this is my interpretation, Ngũgĩ is giving her so much attention in the story, and then in the end she becomes our heroine, right? She's the hero, she's the victor, and slays this lion. That's incredible to see, being written by an African man who's 83 years old, right? And still able to bring out new themes. So there's a subtext there that that perhaps you might have overlooked, but I just wanted to talk about that. I really liked her the centrality of women, and particularly her. And I think going back to having spent time in East Africa and Uganda, the Kenyan women I know are all very strong women, right? Particularly I'll speak about the Kikuyu, like they are matriarchs. And I think I'm not sure if it's a Kikuyu, but you take on your mother's surname or you take on your mother's clan. So I was interested in this idea. And I think knowing that this is the foundation that underpins Kikuyu culture, it makes a lot of sense as to why I see so many, I'm generalizing, but why you sort of see them at the fore, why you sort of saw women involved in the anti-colonial struggle through the Mau Mau. So there was a lot being said for me here.
Yeah, I do see what you mean in terms of feminism, but I wondered, is it really feminism? Because if that's just part of the culture, that's Kikuyu culture. So when I was doing the research into it, the 9 Kikuyu clans are based on a matriarch. So I'm not really. I guess I don't really vibe with the word feminism, because it kind of suggests that all of Africa was very patriarchal, and then there was like a feminist revolution, and then but really our cultures have always had a lot of nuance. Some cultures are matriarchal, some cultures are matrilineal, and women have always had their position in African cultures. So I feel like that's just a part of Kikuyu culture, the fact that the 9 clans were founded by women.
Yeah, but I think that Ngũgĩ, in an interview I watched, she refers to it as the original feminism. And I think Jennifer Nansuruga Makumbi refers to that as the first woman as, again, like African feminism. So no one's sort of I'm not trying to like equate the same labels that we have today about understanding of feminism, but also in the book, the men are surprised at the skills of the women. So even to them, it's come as a shock. It's not like they, when Gira's using the bow arrow, all the men are in awe and they're in shock. So it didn't seem like where they'd come from, but this was like a usual thing or the standard.
Okay, wow, okay, yeah. Getting heated. I kind of feel like, even though, James, you made a point about, even though it's the norm, say for example, you state that it doesn't make it feminism if it's like it's Kikuyu culture, but I think for Ngũgĩ to kind of present it in the canon of like the world literature, then it becomes a feminist statement, because he could have written a story about something completely different. But yeah, so you both make really, really powerful points. I think it's such a short novel that it's not one of those kind of go on for hours, and not to say we shouldn't continue discussing it, but unless there's anything else that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah, I wanted to say something because I noticed there was a lot of hype in regards to the story because it had been put up for the Booker Prize, and I wanted to make a point about what I was saying before in terms of me enjoying it as a story. I think I don't like it when, even though we have a lot more African literature coming out now and from an African perspective and by African writers, I think all literature should still be judged on the same merits in that sense, you know, in the sense that just because this was written by a Kenyan author about the Kikuyu, people are raving about it rather than it actually being something really special. Do you see what I'm saying? So I kind of felt that I was a bit disappointed in that sense because I felt that I've read better epics, you know, I've read better short stories, you know. So yeah.
Going back to what Katasi said about maybe your kind of like the measurement yardstick being based on, say, for example, you used Shakespeare as one who uses subtext, and that
no, I was just giving it. Okay, I was just giving an example of what subtext is to make it clear that even us in our cultures, we have subtexts in the sense that unless you understand a bit more about our cultures, there's things that will happen in our culture, not in our stories, the things that we will say, there's sayings, you know.
But I was making...
But somebody from outside the culture wouldn't necessarily know because that's subtext, right?
Yeah.
My example of Shakespeare was the fact that a lot of people today don't actually understand a lot of what happens in Shakespeare because it's from a different time period.
But I wasn't talking about the time period. I was talking about actual like kind of culture in terms of like maybe country-wise or national cultures as opposed to kind of time periods. But I wanted to also say as well, could the fact that maybe we're maybe me and you more than Katasi, but potentially yourself more than me, but could the fact that we're treating or viewing Ngũgĩ's story less than, does that stem from the fact that we've kind of been exposed to Western non-African epics? We've read maybe I haven't, maybe you have, but the Odyssey and, you know, other epics. So therefore the yardstick and the measurement is based off of non-African stories. So you're going, well, this isn't as good as such and such. You know, I don't know if like, are you unfairly kind of like biased towards, maybe subconsciously or unconsciously biased towards Western epics more than the African epic?
I would say no, because I'm just talking about in relation to my enjoyment of the story of itself. And I feel like when you read a lot, you know, it changes your tastes. It's like some of the first books I read when I was younger, I thought they were really, really great. And then I got older and then I discovered actually this wasn't the greatest. And a good example is like the Lord of the Rings, right? Everybody puts the Lord of the Rings up on a pedestal in regards to fantasy. But if you're really in the know, there's a lot of problematic things with the Lord of the Rings. You know, it's bloated, it's long-winded. It's actually, the Lord of the Rings is actually based on Welsh and Icelandic epics. It's based on the Eddas, right? So I'm just talking about in relation to what I got from it as a story. You know, it didn't really touch me or hit me. I didn't enjoy it for its merits as a story. And I think that is kind of a universal thing. It doesn't have to be based on whether or not you're comparing Western literature to another culture, because not all Western literature is good. Like I said, you know, I think I remember when I was growing up, people used to talk about The Wizard of Oz. You know, it's supposed to be a classic story. I thought it was a terrible story. Yeah, I feel like for its merits as a story, I didn't really, I feel like it could have been better, you know? So that's what I mean. I'm not talking about comparing it to Western literature or literature from different places, you know? I think that any story has to stand up on its own on the merits of it being a story, you know, and if you enjoy it or not. And I feel like I didn't really enjoy it that much. It's kind of like, for example, if you want to talk about, you want to write a story, right? and you want to talk about culture. You know, you can kind of put it down in a very rudimentary way and say that this is what happens, this is the aspects of the culture that I'm talking about. But that doesn't really work as a story. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying in regards to kind of it being a bit of a shopping list. Like, I can see all the things that he wanted to talk about. I can understand some of the imagery and the themes he was going on, but then as a story, was that really weaved into an effective story? And I feel like that was lacking.
Well, I mean, quickly, if Katas, maybe you had a point, but quickly, so far, and myself included, we haven't mentioned any other African epic that's on the same kind of maybe level as something like maybe the Greeks, or even Lord of the Rings or the Wizard of Oz, and those kind of stories, those big kind of fantastical mythical stories. So right now, I think our kind of maybe, let me speak for myself and you actually, I think, because you made reference to Icelandic and Welsh, but I don't hear anything being said about, I don't know, Burkina Faso, Kenyan, Somali epics, or Gabon epics. You know what I mean? We're not as exposed to those kind of African epics. And perhaps if they were our first entrance into mythical stories. And in fact, actually they were when we were younger, but maybe it being compiled in that kind of format, we haven't really been exposed to that. So perhaps I would say that maybe we have expectations that are based on an unconscious, and I would even say conscious bias towards. Let me land in the Savannah Plains. We have an unconscious bias, which is actually become conscious towards Western writing, whether it's myths or epics or rom-coms, whatever. We're always measuring anything that is other than to these Western stories, whether we like it or not, because that's what we heard in school, year 6, unless you had, even if you had African education, you know, based on the colonizer, you know.
True, but what I would say to that is, when you're talking about an epic, so a genuine epics tend to be, it's like they're like the compiled kind of mythology of a people. Right, they tend to be very different from anything that you've actually ever really read, and they kind of evolve and they kind of grow organically, you know, and they're passed down, and things can change about them, right? And I think in this case, even though Ngũgĩ's trying to write an epic, Ngũgĩ is a 21st century author. You see what I'm saying? I feel like from the perspective of just it being an epic, it's very difficult to kind of judge epics in that perspective when an epic is really just kind of like the historical mythology compilation of a people. It's not necessarily meant to be a story in that sense. And I feel like Ngũgĩ is actually an author, and he's turning the Kikuyu creation myth into a story. So I'm expecting more from him, you know, because I'm not looking at this from the perspective of this is literally some ancient texts. See, like, for example, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Yeah, that's literally a 2,000, 3,000-year-old ancient text. You know, that you can read it. Some people enjoy it, some people don't, but other people complain about it, right? But this is written by a 21st century author, and it's supposed to kind of, I expected it to kind of hit from the perspective of bringing something new to the table, you know, of being a story on its own merits. And I feel like it failed in that sense.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, just as a disclaimer from me, I feel like I haven't read enough epics to be able to contribute to, you know, as eloquently as you have, perhaps, James. But I still think it's important to recognize that our tastes are shaped by the things that we consume. And unless, again, like I said before, you're sort of citing from non-Eurocentric epics, and which is central to like our book club, you know, then it's difficult for me to sort of not acknowledge your points, but like I am a bit more skeptical. But I think that it's really bold of you as well to just be so honest and say that you don't like this, because obviously Ngũgĩ is a renowned So some people would just might be wanting to just sort of be appeasing and just not say what they want. But
Okay.
Kudos
Well,
to you for being so honest. But I don't think, like Kalunji said earlier on, because it's quite a short one, I don't think there's sort of too much that we need to go into, like unless there's anything that we haven't spoken about.
I just wanted to say that the Epic of Gilgamesh isn't Western, it's from Babylon.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I think, yeah, and that's a natural way to end it. It's let's get out of this Babylon. But yeah. So, does anyone have any kind of other things they want to say, but also, something that they're up to right now? James, you never tell us what you're up to. What's your app going? What's the stage of your app? The Bantu
My app,
names. Yeah.
I haven't had time really. It's frustrating because I actually have to spend money on Azure to kind of host it on Azure. So it's like it cost me like £125 a month.
What's
But I haven't.
Dejo?
Azure, yeah, Microsoft Azure. So it's a cloud platform.
Oh.
The cloud. So with Azure, you can spin up a website within an hour, and all of the tools are online. So if you allocate memory, hosting, all of the things you need to do to set up a website, you can do it through Azure, and they just allocate it in the cloud. So that's how I got set up, but it has a fee with it. So I haven't because I've had issues with my first PC, so I had to switch over to the home PC, and I haven't really been working on it. I haven't worked on it for a while.
Well, we hope things get better for you.
But I do want to say that I want to try some more of Ngũgĩ's work, to read some more of his other stuff and see what else he has to say as an author.
Yeah, please do. Same here as well. I would love to dive more into his work. Yes, Katasi.
I would like to do the same. I'd like to read some more of Ngũgĩ's works. What's happening? Oh, finally, Fair Mag is out, guys. The one about Kampala, the Kampala issue. So basically, Fair Mag is a city-specific travel journal dedicated to basically giving the reader like an in-depth understanding of a city and its culture, from food and history. And I've basically been guest curating this for the last while, and it's finally out, and you can order it on fairmag.com. Got some amazing interviews in there, some beautiful illustrations and photography, mostly done by Ugandans and other bits. But it's one of those things that you read if you're sort of like missing home. I think it brings out lots of nostalgia, and I learned a lot from sort of doing some research alongside it and from the interviews. So yeah, check it out, Fair Mag. There's distributors. You can get it from the UK, and they also ship internationally.
Oh, so it's not an online thing?
No, it's actually it's a physical copy. It's really exciting because I think it's the 10th edition, and this is like the first African city that they've covered. So I'm just like, yeah, an East African first, because normally it would be like
West Africa or South Africa. But
yeah.
Is it fair as in FARE?
Yeah, as in food, like, or like the cost of my fare is FAR, yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. Oh, wow, yeah. That's great. I've seen some of the pictures, and you've spoken to some amazing people. Even spoke to Buganda royal family as well. So, as in you involved. I don't know if you spoke to them directly, but you got this.
Yeah. We can interviewed Princess Joan Nasolo, who's very interested in like this kind of thing we've been talking around, like preserving culture. So she did Legend of Buganda, but our conversation went beyond that, and it was really around understanding Buganda, pre-colonial Buganda, and understanding what our rituals and our culture were, because I think that's the catch, isn't it? Everything starts in the 1800s. The 1800s when the colonizers came and started documenting. So speaking to what Kalunji was saying around our history starts when it's documented as opposed to before. But yeah, her as well as a DJ called Campire, who's a queer DJ. She was really interesting to speak to, because I often think that the discussion around homosexuality in Uganda doesn't involve the people who are there. It's often told by the West, but hearing someone who works in this space, who identifies as that, was really interesting. And then I think what was also nice with this issue had the diasporic link, so interviewed Georgia Poet as well. And also just learning about the foundations of Matoke,
Matoke.
Yeah, so like, do check it out when, yeah, comes out this month.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I thought that would be really, really controversial though, when you talk about the queer DJ. Hello? Can't hear you, Katasi. You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. I think the editor, Ben Mervis, it was fantastic. He allowed us to go to some really controversial places. It's not like, Uganda isn't a bed of roses. So whilst I'm all about amplifying it, we were able to talk about some like hard hitting issues. And that was one of them. And with George, he talks a lot about, the politics of Uganda and things like that. But yeah.
Okay, good.
You got the links. Let's have a look at that.
Yeah, sounds exciting. Really sounds exciting. For me, very briefly, you can find all my stuff, kalunji.co.uk, or just follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Right now, I'm the narrator of Chintu by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi on Audible, so you can listen to that. 14 hours of me just...
Oh, you're the narrator. Okay. Oh, wow.
Yes, I am. Yeah, so 14 hours of me reading out that story. Incredible. Did that in 5 days with 2 hours to spare. And then I'm also doing another thing. I'll say that. Thank you. I'll say the other kind of Audible later on in weeks to come. So yeah, so I'm just trying to like stay busy, stay involved in the Ugandan kind of culture and just African culture in general. So check that out. You can always listen to my music as well on Spotify or iTunes or any other kind of streaming sites. My debut album, Katugende, just search Kalunji Fresh and you'll be able to get the links. And you can, of course, always buy my clothing line, Kalunjam. Got new, exciting stuff on its way, And follow our Twitter and our Instagram. We got amazing reels, amazing Twitter videos, and just like and subscribe. It's so important to like and subscribe because it shows YouTube that you're engaging with it. So if you like something, just click subscribe. It takes 0 seconds to just click the like and the subscribe. So please do and share this because we're getting love out there, and you're loving us, all the people that are involved, and of course our kind of stable members and anyone who's a silent but deadly supporter. Please continue to do that, but now be louder and be vocal because we appreciate it. Thank you very much. And unless the two of you have anything else to say, I think we should put an end to this.
Thanks so much for coming, James.
Thank you, James.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks.
Thank you.
All on day, the one that fits ya.